I, as a child, was studying many instruments and writing music and having a great time and getting a lot of advice to focus, choose one thing or another. And of course, I didn't want to do that, and I kept studying the flute and the violin and the piano and writing music. And I had a chance to conduct a piece I had written and took a lesson to get rudimentary skills to do that. I think I was 14. And it was a revelation. Oh, I'm going to add instruments and try and figure out everything else I need to learn and know so that I can do this. This is the ticket. This is the answer. So that kind of unlocked a little puzzle for me. I knew I wanted to be a musician, but I didn't know where my focus would lead, and that's where it ended up. I guess as a composer, I'm particularly fascinated with what composers are doing now, what's happening in music today. It's such a fertile, diverse, exciting landscape, and I love premieres, I love second performances, I love working with composers. It's great to be able to interact with them about their music in a way that you just simply can't with a dead composer. And it's a great facet to my life that I really relish. I had so many great mentors along the way that so many different things stuck with me and stay with me to this day. I remember my first teacher saying, be attentive and be aware that the greatest energy is in the initiation. So the upbeat, the beginning of something is the most important moment. Once something's in motion, it doesn't take as much energy to sustain it, but beginnings of things require particular attention and investment. I remember my boss, in a sense, Joe Primavera, who was the youth orchestra conductor in Philadelphia, where I was the assistant while I was a student at Curtis, telling me if I bent my knees one more time, he was going to take me out back and break them. And I remember Ozawa saying something so beautiful when I was working for him. Oh, you have to make sure that the beat here happens when the orchestra expects it, which I think is such a great way to look at what's supposed to be happening between an orchestra and a conductor. I think it's very hard to know about oneself many things. We know who we think we are, or who we'd like to be, or who we imagine ourselves to be, but it's so difficult sometimes to get a real sense of ourselves. I think that my conducting work itself has changed over time in that I'm increasingly interested in that discovery of what does the orchestra need for it to sound great. And I think earlier in one's life, it's very easy to feel like, what do I need to do? Conducting is a mysterious task. I said recently, somebody was asking about conducting, and I said, well, and referring to an assistant conductor, maybe the hardest thing to explain other than a conductor is an assistant conductor. There's something mysterious about the art. How does this gestural vocabulary evoke music? And how does the person on the podium become the conduit for the collective creativity of the group? Conducting is such a great word in English for the task. It's not so in dirigent or chef d'orchestre. You don't get the same metaphor of the beauty of the task, which is to be a conduit for something, to be the lightning rod for the collective will of the group. But that also means, as a conductor, establishing a course and leading the way. So I find that maybe early in my career, I was very concerned about what I was doing and was I doing the right thing. But now I'm much more concerned with, is the group getting what they need and the piece getting what it needs to happen. And if I can just stand there and that can happen, that's a beautiful experience too. Well, I think in terms of the musical influences in my life, it starts at home. My father, my mother, my grandmother, my uncle, my other grandfather. It was a family of musicians, and that influence sticks. And then I was also really lucky to have a masterful piano teacher as a child, who was also a great influence on my life. It wasn't just music, but also how one thinks about life, how music relates to life, what it means to live a good life. A lot of that came from him. And I was also very lucky as a teenager to have a composition teacher who similarly really shaped a lot of my thinking, not just about music, but about everything. Then later, of course, studying with important teachers and working for monumentally great conductors, that was all beautiful influence too. But maybe the most profound thing for me as a musician is the composers I get to live with. And the composers I don't always perform, but I live with in my mind. Bach and Mozart and Sibelius, Tchaikovsky, Bartók, Debussy. They're great companions. I'm often asked, what is it like preparing a world premiere or a new score or new music? For me, it's the same as studying a Mozart symphony or a Mahler symphony, in the sense that the score is always an indicator. It's always a clue to what has to happen musically. I know people say play what's written, and I mean, of course we start, those of us who were trained working with texts of music, we start with tremendous respect and interest and study of the score, but ultimately there's the Zen parable of the finger pointing at the moon, and the poor disciple keeps staring at the finger. The score is the finger, and we've got to get to the moon. So at some point, the study of the score has to transform into an understanding of the music that we transmit. Maybe the most the ridiculous thing that I ever experienced was in a performance of Magic Flute at the Santa Fe Opera during one of the dialogue sections, which were in English. Someone in the audience, it was a controversial production, and someone in the audience stood up, clearly drunk, and said, "This is expletive. This is terrible. I bleed for Mozart." Finally, they're hauling him out of the auditorium. And once he's gone, Papageno's next line on stage, as scripted, was "Quiet in here, isn't it?" And we couldn't have asked for a better outcome. It's always difficult when asked how to advise young conductors to know what to say. For me, I find it very challenging what's important for them. But if there's one thing I would say kind of universally or generally, it would be take the responsibility of being the advocate of the composer as the primary responsibility. Be the servant of the music. Strive to reveal its truth. There's that danger of wanting to imprint one's personality, in my mind. Cocteau had a beautiful line, an original artist cannot help but be original, therefore he need only copy. And I think as a conductor, if you really strive to understand the music and reveal the music as it is, the imprint of your personality will be there without effort and without trying. I think the common misstep aspiring conductors often have is learning how to trust the orchestra. Orchestras do so much for themselves, of themselves. We have a tremendous responsibility to the composer and to the orchestra and to the audience and to the art to help make that process work and happen. But it's a worthy study to find out what the orchestra does without you as a conductor, and therefore finding out what do they need you for. And I think that's a difficult study, especially at an initial stage of learning to conduct.